Let's start off with a question. Think back to your first year of teaching, or even your student teaching. I want you to nod your head yes if you were ever caught off guard by the personal questions that students asked you. Raise your hand and say yes if your feelings were ever hurt by those comments. I know it's a part of working with kids for which I was not at all prepared. For those of you who know me, or who ever seen a photo, you know that I keep my head shaved because, well, I don't have that much hair anymore. Let me just back up a moment and say that baldness is one of those things where it's okay for me to comment and joke in a sort of self-deprecating sort of way, but it is not okay for others to poke fun. Trust me, I would much rather be able to keep up with the latest hairstyles, all of which seem to require a lot of hair. My name is Matt Weld, and I'm the host of the Teacher's Classroom, and I'm bald. I'm also glad you're here. My students would ask me things about why I'm bald or say, Mr. Weld, you look funny with no hair. One of the things I've noticed about adolescents is that they have this uncanny ability to find your weak spots, your vulnerabilities. My hair loss is one of those, and my students invariably identified it as such. After those comments, I had two choices. I could react to the perceived insult and scold the kid, take them out the hall, send them to the office, write them up, whatever. Or I could forgive them. But forgiveness isn't always so easy, and it's messy. It's something that we as adults continually work on, and something that we need to teach our students how to do. Today, we're going to explore forgiveness and how we might embed it into our daily instruction.
It's the willingness to let go of negative feelings that you feel towards another person for an unjust hurt.
That's Ashley Monier.
I'm going to be real with you. I am a grudge holder. That is something that I struggle with. So that's why I think it's so important to teach this concept, because I am someone who even now still struggles with the idea of forgiving someone and moving past it and not having that just kind of get me down all the time.
More importantly, she's an 11-year veteran of the Air Force who is now studying psychology and history at Southern Illinois University at Edwardsville, commonly called SIUE.
We worked at the Jackie Joyner Kersey Center in East St. Louis, teaching social emotional skills to the preschoolers there. I still do some volunteer work where I'm able to help the teachers and spend a little bit more one-on-one time with the kiddos, which is really nice. And again, we're working at the Madison County Juvenile Detention Center, teaching the Compassionate Approach to Learning Meditation program to the residents there. And we've been doing that for about a year now. And I will be doing that continuing in the fall.
Her colleague is Abigail Haloftis.
My name is Abigail Haloftis. I'm a student at Southern Illinois University in Edwardsville. I'm actually a double major in psychology and criminal justice. I'm getting ready to graduate here in December.
I started out my exploration of forgiveness with Abigail and Ashley by asking them for an official psychology textbook definition of forgiveness.
So honestly, I'm going to be real with you. There's not necessarily one specific definition that everybody in the field of psychology agrees upon. And the different articles that I read, it kind of goes focusing on like the same ideas, but just worded in different ways and maybe having different parts of it. There's one that I really hit on that I really like that says it's the willingness to let go of negative feelings that you feel towards another person for an unjust hurt. And instead you're trying to like foster those positive feelings, such as mercy, love, stuff like that towards the other person. But when we go to the detention center, we pretty much just say, like, moving forward after someone has hurt you without anger and the weight of what they're doing. And that's kind of what we talked about in the presentation at the Conversations Towards a Brighter Future conference, is essentially releasing that weight, that stuff that holds you down from those angry feelings that you have when you think about someone or think about a situation or see them, releasing that and being able to move forward with your best possible self.
Right. And that seems like what I struggled with students in getting them to understand how it was possible. Mm-hmm. Because just as me personally, as a person who doesn't carry grudges, really, it was hard for me to understand that people carried around this weight, like psychological weight that probably becomes physiological.
So absolutely. I feel like we like to drive the point that forgiveness is actually an independent and internal process that everybody has to make on their own. It's not a quick fix that we can just snap our fingers and forgive somebody. It takes a lot of time for some people, a lot of energy and strength. And it's ultimately our choice on whether we're going to forgive somebody or not, or if we're going to keep the grudge or carry on that weight. It's a personal choice.
Yeah.
You're right. A lot of people do carry that with them. And I think that it can be really impactful, both on a mental health standpoint and a physiological standpoint, because grudges and anger can definitely affect a lot of things within our bodies. And trying to work through that and get over that so that way we can be our best possible selves is probably the greatest gifts that we can give ourselves, but one that we don't really necessarily realize we need.
So, and I want to talk about how we can get people to move through it, either as teachers ourselves or as teachers helping students. But first, you guys talked about some different kinds of forgiveness. And I guess I never really thought of forgiveness as, in that way. So can you go over those types?
So we talk about two different types of forgiveness. So the first one is, the one I think everybody thinks of, the forgiveness of other people. So somebody who's done something to us and we have to, say, I'm sorry, or we have to get through that feeling of, anger or resentment towards them, which is like, honestly, it's one of the things that I think everybody thinks of really quickly is I forgive you for, hurting my feelings or something like that. But one that we feel like people forget is self-forgiveness. And self-forgiveness is a huge part of our lives because we also carry our own guilt, our own weight and stuff like that. So we have to learn to forgive ourselves. Everybody's capable of forgiveness, and we have to be able to give ourselves our own forgiveness.
Do you think it's important to do one before the other?
I think that's a good question. And I think that I think it honestly depends on the situation. A lot of answers in psychology, a lot of questions can be answered by "it depends," I guess. And it depends on the situation. It depends on what you need. It depends on how you like the state of yourself and how your mental well-being is and stuff like that. But I think that learning to forgive ourselves is something that a lot of people struggle with. And the example that I gave at the presentation was I was never a very good student in high school. I almost didn't graduate because at that point in my life, I just did not care about education and I wasn't really thinking about the future. So now that I'm back in school, years later, I'm back in school and education is really important to me. So I've been trying my best to get the best grades that I can. And when I get a grade that I don't like, I get really upset with myself because I think, Ashley, you're better than that. I can't believe you did that. Why would you not study harder? You knew that this was due before. I go through all of these things. And if I were to let those things pile up, it would affect the way that I view myself and it would affect the way that I deal with other people. So I think that self-forgiveness is a really important concept. And when you're happier with yourself and when you're more at peace with who you are as a person, you're going to be more willing to, I guess, give grace to other people, if that makes sense.
Right. And then, Ashley, you're a parent too,
yes,
right?
I have 2 children.
Do you feel that when you have trouble forgiving yourself and like all that builds up, that it can come out in how you deal with your family?
Absolutely. I also am someone who has a kind of a quick temper. So when I am extra stressed out, or when I'm down on myself, or when I'm feeling less than I know that I'm capable of, obviously I'm going to be more quick to, I call it pop off at my kids, get upset with them for something small, or make a bigger deal out of something than whatever it is they did actually was. So I think that definitely when I am more unhappy with myself, or when I'm more stressed out, I am more quick to pop off, and that can lead to strained relationships in this household for sure.
Yeah. So Abigail, at the conference, you guys also talked about re-forgiveness, which is something I had never thought about. Can you explain that a little bit? Because that's a valuable concept, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. So we talk about the concept of re-forgiveness because forgiveness isn't necessarily always permanent. Some people think, oh, I forgave them, they said they were sorry, we're done, it's all. But in reality is sometimes we still get upset by those things. Even though it's happened and it's done, we've talked about it, we've forgiven each other, we still have those feelings come back up. Which I don't think some people like to talk about, because they're like, oh, why am I still thinking about this? Like, we've already been through this. But it's not just this one and done thing. So we have to work to say to ourselves, yes, this happened. It doesn't mean that what they did was okay, but we're going to move forward and continue to have this relationship with this person. And that's even with ourselves. We have to re-forgive ourselves for mistakes we make and things like that.
Two things you said in there that I think are important that I'd like to delve into a little bit more. The first one is that you said that what you did is not okay. So when you forgive somebody, it's still okay to say what you did is not okay, right? I mean,
absolutely. You can 100% express that what you did, that the way you're feeling is that you did something wrong. It doesn't diminish the fact that you did something wrong to me, but I'm choosing to move forward. I'm choosing to move on with you, or not even move on with you. Like, in some cases, people don't have to reconcile with them, but they choose to move on with their own lives without holding anger and grudges and things like that.
Yeah, you guys showed a video that I don't know that I would be able to do this as a parent, but you guys showed a video of a woman whose son was murdered. Mm-hmm. And then it turns out that the man who murdered her son is now living next door to her.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's actually my favorite story, and I feel like people don't, like, this is forgiveness on a whole nother level.
A whole nother level.
100%. Like, because like you said, like, I don't know if I'd be able to do that. I'm not a parent, but I couldn't imagine, like, trying to forgive or even have a relationship with someone who has taken that from me.
So I think what's important here, though, is that in every situation, there are two parties, right? There's you and then whoever else. And each one is responsible for their own actions. So the I don't know, what would you call it, the perpetrator? The other person.
Transgressor.
There we go. The transgressor has done an action. And then you, as the person to whom you were transgressed against, this is awful, but so the other person has done something to you, right? And you felt in yourself that what they did was wrong in some particular instance. You can't fix what they did, but you can fix your reaction.
Absolutely.
Right.
So somehow you have to sever that cord, that relationship between the two actions, and say, okay, what you did, you did. That's now on you, right? But what I'm going to do is I am choosing to move on with goodness and, positive feelings.
Yeah, I like that. So, like, in the video with Mary, who is the mom, she says actually that the forgiveness is not for him. It's for her. And it doesn't diminish what he's done. She knows what he's done and the consequences. But she says that unforgiveness is like a cancer. And it kind of is in a way. It kind of like just spreads through you and it holds you back.
Right. Well, the other thing you talked about was a continuum. And it seems like so many things as humans, it's either one or the other. It's black and white. It's on or it's off, binary 1 or 0. Whereas really there's a continuum. And so when you talked about re-forgiveness, I think just like in decision making or autism spectrum or, anything like that, there's this whole spectrum between forgiveness, like the woman in the video that I think is an example of true forgiveness. And then maybe a 6th grade girl in the middle of drama saying, oh, it's okay. Would you agree? Or am I off base there?
So Ashley came up with like this concept that we've actually integrated into the comm program, the re-forgiveness concept. So I'm going to let her kind of talk to you a little bit about that, because I think she has kind of almost a better understanding of it, because this is a concept that she really thought about a lot.
Thank you, Abigail. Yeah. So, I think that the concept of re-forgiveness is definitely, or the concept of forgiveness in general is a continuum, because, there are so many aspects to forgiveness, and there are so many things that someone can do knowingly or unknowingly to hurt somebody else. And I think that when you go through and actually consider forgiving somebody, the person, like Abigail said, doesn't have to say what you did was okay. You don't have to make amends with the person. You don't have to go through and have a relationship with the person again. You don't have to do any of that stuff, which I think is a lot of kind of what people view forgiveness as, right? It's when you're in grade school and someone pushes you down and they bring you to a parent or a teacher or a grown-up or whatever, and they say, okay, now say sorry. All right, now you two go play. I feel like that's kind of what people view forgiveness as a very black and white, I forgive you, now we have to have a relationship again. And with me, that's something that I've struggled with, especially in familial relationships, relationships with family, where you kind of have to deal with somebody, right? You can choose to cut the person off, or you can choose to have them in your life. But with family, it's a little bit harder to cut people off. It happens, and there are definitely justified reasons why it happens. But sometimes people choose to continue to have a relationship, even if the transgression was pretty large. So I think that understanding that throughout your life, if something was meaningful enough to you, if something hurt you enough, if something made an impact on you enough, it might creep back into your life, even though you choose to have a relationship with that person. Say, Abigail and I are sisters, and she did something that I just thought was absolutely horrible, but we're going to see each other. I choose to forgive her, but every once in a while, I still feel bitterness and animosity. That's normal. It's okay. It's that you're working to forgive them. It's that you're working towards getting into a place where you don't feel that bitterness and animosity. It's normal that it will happen. It's normal that it could happen. But the fact that you're trying to work through it and you're not holding on to it, you're not bringing it up, you're not obsessing over it, you're not shoving it in their face all the time. Well, you did this every time you get into another argument. I think that that's probably one of the biggest things when dealing with someone that you're choosing to continue to have a relationship with, especially if the transgression is large.
Yeah. And so when we're working with kids in the classroom, I know I was guilty of this, and I've witnessed it, as a person who went into different buildings and saw all kinds of stuff in classrooms, that two kids would be in an altercation and the teacher would pull them aside and you'd have them, talk it over. I feel you did this. And then you'd teach them about the I statements and blah, 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 blah. But then you'd say, okay, so shake hands. And then you would expect it to be done, but it's not, right? Because the forgiveness was kind of forced on them, I guess. So,
yeah.
So instead of coming to that place within themselves, it was like top down. And so is there a way, like, how do you guys feel that teachers should handle a situation when there's an argument between two students in their class?
That is a good question. Obviously, there at some points has to be interventions between the teacher or another administrator. And I think that it's good to get kids to talk about it and to say what their feelings are, using those I statements and, explaining it in a somewhat calm and controlled environment. But understanding that those feelings won't necessarily just go away is a big deal. And learning the idea of perspective taking, kind of putting yourself in someone else's shoes, from what I've read, seems to be a really big contributor to forgiveness. Having compassion for other people and the idea of perspective taking is a really big contributor to whether or not someone will, I guess, be more willing to forgive someone for a transgression. And I think that environment is going to have a lot to do with that as well. How does people that surrounds them deal with that conflict? How do they handle it too? You know what I mean? So
right.
Learning to do that, I think that getting children more involved in perspective taking is a really big step towards instilling forgiveness in the hearts of our young children.
And so how would you actually do that with kids? Is that something that's done one-on-one with each of them separately or as a group, or how do you have kids take on a different perspective?
So I actually was just reading an article about this the other day, and one of them talked about teaching the concept of forgiveness as a form of character education, teaching kids core ethical values and stuff like that when they're younger. And in younger children, I'm not sure how well this would work in older children or adults, but they actually read a Dr. Seuss book, Horton Hears a Who. Mm-hmm. In which the elephant Horton, they read this book as I'm going to teach you about this. They read the book. They kind of concentrate on the fact that, I guess Horton ends up helping out the little Whos. Right. And are they still worthy, even though they're small? Are they still, they're not as big, they're unseen. Are they still worthy of being considered, not humans, but are they still worthy of being considered as valuable in society? And then, after the book, the kids would kind of talk about that, and then they would do an activity where they had a stuffed elephant. They would cut out stuff, and they'd say, okay, pair of glasses, put glasses on Horton. All right. Do you think Horton is still worthy even though he's wearing glasses? And then you kind of explain, yeah, even though he's different than me, or he is unusual in this way, or he has this thing going on that I don't, he is still worthy. And then they'd eventually move on to teaching, okay, Horton hurt your feelings by saying something, is he still worthy of a person? So kind of going from these are little people who maybe you don't know, are they still worthy, to up to the forgiveness stage, they hurt you, are they still worthy? And teaching that, that kind of a thing is, from what I've read, is actually been beneficial. But I think that there's still a lot of, research opportunities there for sure. Yeah.
Well, there's your PhD thesis right there.
There we go. Got it figured out.
So I almost think that we should because as she was saying, these are things that we're trying to get kids to do. We experience things in school, you do junior achievement or, the DARE program and things like that. I feel like we should try to maybe even do something like that in classrooms, an hour for once a week for 5 weeks, just to talk about this as kind of a program to help us learn this in a different way, instead of forcing it to be I feel this way or I feel that way. No, shake hands, we're done, because that's just not how it works, unfortunately.
Exactly. Yeah, there is the whole list of social emotional learning standards for Illinois that I'm not sure everyone even knows exists. But I feel like the schools who incorporate into that daily curriculum and the teachers who incorporate those lessons, just embed them all the time and are constantly reinforcing them have better outcomes. And
Definitely.
yeah, so we just need to move in that direction for everybody.
Yeah.
I think that making this concept of forgiveness applicable to what the children actually go through is a really big, important step also. For example, I wouldn't go to a middle school and talk about forgiveness of others and then talk about me getting cut off on the side of the road and almost pushed into median, right? Like that wouldn't be applicable to them. They don't understand how that feels.
Right, because they don't drive, so yeah.
Exactly. So in detention, because some of the kids there drive and some of them don't, I've used the example that some people have laughed at, but about if someone steps on your shoes, right? Like that's something that isn't super big that a lot of people can really relate to, because I know, especially when I was in middle school and high school, shoes were a big deal and not that much has changed. So if someone steps on your shoes, especially if they were expensive shoes, people have actually gotten into physical fights over this, even if it was an accident. So being able to take that example and then put it into, okay, how could you handle this? What would be appropriate? Do you think it's okay to like keep a grudge over someone who held onto the shoe or stepped on your shoe who maybe didn't even realize they did? What effect is that going to have on you? When you see that person in the hall, you're going to be upset with them. They might not even care. So it's only really affecting you, and kind of showing kids like in a way that they can understand is going to be one of the best ways to do it. And like Abigail said, including a program, maybe something like the Compassionate Approach to Learning meditation program, like maybe a short couple session program where they go through and they deal with this and they learn about this. I think maybe that would be a good idea also.
Well, and we have to remember that this forgiveness part is just one section of the whole conflict resolution sequence, right? So we're kind of dealing, taking this one little concept out of context. So we have to remember that there's a whole bunch of stuff that needs to be in place.
Exactly.
I mean, forgiveness can be your thing. And, that's maybe what you concentrate on a lot. But you have to remember that when you're embedding all these social, emotional conflict resolution ideas into your classroom or curriculum, that there's a whole lot more than just forgiveness.
For sure.
Exactly.
All right. So do you think that we talked a little bit about the beginning, that some people are more apt to hold grudges and to not forgive than other people? I noticed in the resources that you gave that there was an article on personality types and correlation with forgiveness.
Yes. I honestly think that kind of like we talked about perspective taking, are people willing to put themselves in others' shoes, stuff like that. Those concepts that people really internalize are going to help you to be able to forgive somebody. And people who concentrate and like really ruminate on all the bad stuff that happens, when they just keep rehashing the same negative stuff over and over and over. If you are a ruminator, a grudge holder, someone who thinks about the bad stuff a lot, it's going to be harder for you to forgive also. So I think that that's one of the biggest things that I can say, is because I know that that's something I do as I ruminate. I think about what I could have done, what happened and the consequences for it, what could have happened and what consequence might have happened, whether or not that's actually true. So I think that people who ruminate are definitely people who have a harder time dealing with that and kind of changing your thought process and trying to stay in the now, in the present, being mindful of the current situation and not stressing about the past or the future is what can really help people concentrate on forgiveness.
And so you mentioned mindfulness. So bring this a whole nother topic, and I've done episodes on this already, but so bringing mindfulness maybe into your personal practice or into your classroom, could that be a tool to help kids not ruminate?
Yeah.
100%.
Yes. I think that mindfulness is something that people don't really think about, right? We're always taught to think about the future. What are you going to do in the future? What are you going to do after college? What are you going to do then? And people don't really get to experience the here and now. They just concentrate on what happened previously or what's going to happen in the future. So I think that obviously preparing for stuff is a great idea, but really concentrating on the now and how things are affecting you now and what you can do about it and what steps you can take to get where you want to go is definitely something that could help.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And that's part of your CALM program, right?
Yeah. It's a big concept that we talk about. It's one of the first things we actually talk about because it's hard to understand something if you're not here and now learning about it. Because if we're so we use the example, so if we're talking here right now, but I'm thinking about lunch, I'm not really getting everything out of it because I'm not really here. I'm thinking about lunch or something else or, what my parents said to me last night, things like that. So it's a concept that we like to introduce actually right away because it's so important.
So you introduce the concept of mindfulness, and what activity do you take them through?
When we go through and we talk about mindfulness, we kind of talk about mindfulness and compassion meditation kind of together. And we use the use of a mantra to kind of block out intrusive thoughts when we're really trying to concentrate on our deep breathing and stuff like that. We use diaphragmatic breathing in the CALM program, where you're taking deep breaths from your diaphragm to calm yourself. And we have the use of a mantra that actually blocks out intrusive thoughts, so that way you don't concentrate on what could happen, what has happened, what you're worried about. You're just concentrating on being here in the present and really thinking about what it is you need to think about.
And you've found success with kids with whom you work, that they've mentioned that works for them and they've now carried it into their personal practice?
Yeah, we actually do a mantra activity, which I was skeptical when I first read about it, to be honest with you. But when I actually tried it, it works. So you have the children add up a set of 5 numbers, and the different numbers add up to the number 15, right? Okay, I'm going to read to you these numbers, add them in your head, don't use your fingers. Read to them the numbers. Most of the time, everyone says, yep, it was 15. Okay, wonderful. Now I'm going to have you say the ABCs, not sing-songy, but just A, B, C. And then I'm going to give you numbers again, and I want you to add them in your head. Keep saying the alphabet out loud, but count the numbers up in your head. You will not believe the different numbers that people give out at the end. Okay, how many did you get? This person got 12. This person got 7. In reality, the numbers that we told them to add were just in a different order, but they were the exact same numbers from the first time. So they added up to 15. But this person was like, I couldn't even count. I couldn't remember after you said the second number. I couldn't remember after you said this. Yeah. And it's because we can't do 2 verbal tasks at one time. We can't do 2 language tasks at one time. So the ABCs are to put in place the idea of a mantra, and then the numbers are supposed to represent our intrusive thoughts that we don't let through. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
So we kind of use that as a way to show, hey, we're going to be teaching you about this mantra. It might sound silly. You might not think that it works, but here, let me show you. This is kind of standing in place of the exact same thing, the mantra, ABCs, numbers, and then they can actually see. So they're more open to doing the mantra later on. And we've definitely seen that it works. And we've definitely seen that kids have come back and they've told us, yeah, I was able to actually fall asleep because I did my deep breathing and I, made up my own mantra. And I was actually able to get through this stressful event. I was able to wait for court and I didn't freak out because of this, because I used these tools that you've given me. It's actually really, really awesome and really rewarding, which is why we both continue to come back, because it has been such a beneficial program and we can see that in the kids.
Absolutely. It's one of these programs that from the start of the program, you kind of start off skeptical of, is this really, do they take to this? Because, you think of the typical teenager or, child, and they're kind of like, yeah, okay. But or me, even, yeah, I'm like, is this really gonna, work? And it's just amazing. I can't even describe how awesome it is to see these kids just say that it helps. It helps, even if I can just fall asleep faster. I don't wake up more during the night. Those are just great things that we love to hear, because it tells us, yeah, of course, that something's right, something's working.
Right, and what you're doing is having a positive impact, especially on something as important as sleep. Which,
Yeah. And I think that's kind of maybe one of the biggest things that people say. Some of these kids don't really like to open up. So when they tell us, something as simple as, I was actually able to fall asleep, it didn't take me a couple hours. I think that's one of the biggest things. And working with Dr. Jewell on this, like I said, I was a bit skeptical when I first heard about it. I asked him, does this really work? Do these people actually open up to this? Because I know, thinking of 15-year-old me, I would have been like, I am not doing that. That sounds ridiculous. And he said, no, people really get into it, and they really do. They might come in skeptical, but by the end of the 5-day session, they are completely involved and they really actually enjoy it. And when we come back later on, if we see them, if they're there for a bit of a longer stay and we see them a week or two later and they tell us, I'm still doing it. And they get really excited to see us and to tell us about it, which is really rewarding.
Absolutely. And, it's also something that the kids actually, some of them go through it multiple times and they want to go through it more than once. So that's also an awesome feeling to, see that they want to learn more. They want to talk about it more.
Well, and it's not one of those things where you can teach it once and then expect them to have it down.
No, absolutely not. It's something we even, as adults, we have to keep practicing. You have to practice it every day. Even I struggle with it, even when we teach it and everything. Sometimes it's hard to, do it yourself, even though we taught this to other people.
Well, it's like yoga. It's called a practice because you're constantly practicing it.
Exactly. And to really drive it home with these kids, to let them know if midweek they're like, I'm not really getting that much out of it. Okay, well, have you been practicing it? No, I haven't really been. Okay, well, earlier in the program, you said that you like to play basketball or you play golf or you run. When you picked up that ball the very first time, were you able to make a free throw? Well, no. Okay, well, this is the same thing. You're going to get better at it the more you practice. You have to do it in order for it to actually work, or else it's just not going to do anything for you. And so I think that kind of putting these concepts into terms that are relatable to them is probably the biggest thing, because we're actually showing them no, you are into this thing. It relates to this in this way. And so they're better able to internalize it and actually believe that it could be beneficial for them.
Yeah. Well, you guys are doing great work and I appreciate your time today.
No, thank you so much for having us. It was great.
Yes, it's been wonderful.
Yeah, we're going to have to stay in contact because there's a lot of people that need to hear your message, not only just about forgiveness, but all of that. And so I hope you guys continue working with kids, because we need quality people as teachers, as psychologists, social workers. So thank you for your work. Thank you to my guests and to you, my listeners, for joining me today. Resources from today's episode can be found at teachillinois.com/podcasts. The Teacher's Classroom is a production of the Area 5 Regional Offices of Education. My name is Matt Weld, and I'm your host. I can be found at Twitter at Matthew Weld. I hope you'll consider leaving a review on iTunes or wherever you find your podcasts. It helps us become more visible. The whole point of this podcast is to celebrate the work that's going on in education all the time. And if we can get those voices in front of more listeners, I will consider this podcast to be a success. So until next time, thank you for listening and have a great day.